Hello and welcome. I'm Darren. And today we are going to talk about fluid motion frames. So I'm kind of after some advice, I'm after some feedback, I'd like a discussion. I know there's people with AMD GPUs in my chat. I know there are people with NVIDIA and AMD GPUs in my chat. Now, effectively, I just did a recording and I went through fluid motion frames. I ran through some Valhalla, so Assassin's Creed Valhalla, and I made a video, and in looking at the video, it was probably a waste of time. I don't know, I was probably a bit dumb. I remember Daniel Owen doing something on fluid motion frames, and I remember him saying that he had to record it with an external camera for whatever reason it was, but to show basically how it worked and to show the issues that would come up with fluid motion frames. Now I did check Ancient Gameplays, his most recent how to use fluid motion frames video, just to make sure, because I wanted to make sure that I'm doing everything right how I'm supposed to be doing it. So I basically went into Assassin's Creed Valhalla. Now I'm on a 165 hertz display, so I'm kind of thinking that maybe this is a technology that isn't best suited for me. I don't know. But I went into Assassin's Creed Valhalla. I set up the MSI overlay, so the Afterburner overlay with the Reaver tuner. And I set up the Adrenaline overlay. Now, running kind of the native screen resolution at 1440p, I was quite close to my refresh rate. So I ended up messing around with the resolution scale to basically eat some of the performance up that I needed, and then I capped my refresh rate at 80, so that I had to do that in the Reaver tuner, in the MSI Afterburner as well. Is that right? Is there no way of doing it in the Adrenaline software? Because that seems a bit strange to me, that it's a feature within the Adrenaline software, but there's no way to cap your frame rate within the Adrenaline software, and you need to cap your frame rate to half of your frame rate to use it. Is that right? Because you can't use VSync and stuff like that. I'm pretty sure that's the way it is, so I'm not quite sure why AMD haven't. I could be completely wrong, but I use the Reaver tuner, so I capped my frame rate at 80 and basically tried it out. Well, in fact, I actually capped it at 75 to start with, just to make sure that there was nothing that was going to happen in the games. So I capped it at 75 just to make sure. So effectively, it was taking, by the time I enabled fluid motion frames, it was taking it to 150, which I think was a safe, kind of barrier below my 165. So I wasn't going to get any type of screen tearing or anything like that. I did try at 80 as well, towards the end of the video, just to check if I felt any different about it at that point. But I mean, basically my thoughts haven't changed on it. Now, it is my thoughts. I don't expect other people to agree with me. I don't expect people to have the same thoughts of me. I have seen a lot of people like to use it, which is fair enough. But the good thing was, it gave me the choice to try out basically 3 different things. So I could try how it played and felt and looked at 80 hertz. I could play how it looked and felt and played at 160 hertz using AFMF, and I could see and feel and look how it looked at actual 160 hertz, not using fluid motion frames. And I can safely say right now, for anyone using fluid motion frames, If you say that you're getting 200 FPS, you're deluded. I'm sorry, but you are. You're not getting 200 FPS. If I said that I'm getting 160 FPS because my fluid motion frames was reading 160 FPS, it plays and looks and feels, and the fluidity, fluid motion frames at 160 is not the same as 160 native. So I think that's somewhere where people need to kind of be, brought up on that. Whatever you're getting through fluid motion frames isn't what you're getting. It might say you're getting 140 FPS, but if you tell people I'm getting 140 FPS, you are not getting 140 FPS. That isn't happening. Because I was able to try fluid motion frames at 160 FPS, and then I was able to actually just run native 160 FPS. And native on 160 FPS is night and day compared to what fluid motion frames at 160 FPS was. So that's probably the first thing I'll say, because I see a lot of people across the internet say, I'm using fluid motion frames and I'm getting 300 FPS. No, you're not. You're getting fluid motion frames 300 FPS. That isn't the same as 300 FPS. It's quite a bit different. So, my camera doing its stupid autofocus thing. So, that's the first thing I'll say. Kind of the second thing I'll say is, I actually didn't feel much difference between how it felt. Well, I definitely felt a difference between how it felt at 80 FPS to it being at 160 FPS with it activated. So obviously at 80 FPS, I felt like I was playing at 80 FPS. At 160 FPS, I didn't feel that much difference. And the reason is because for it to not deactivate, you have to play slow. And because you have to play slow, you're not effectively doing something that will make you feel or make you see where your 160 FPS would be to be gained from. So effectively, if you're playing a slow-paced game, like I was playing Assassin's Creed, and you're running in a direction, and you're not panning your camera around fast, then you can do that at 80 FPS, and you wouldn't feel the benefit from 80 FPS to probably 160 FPS native. In that situation, you don't feel that. Where you do feel, okay, my FPS is low, is the point in which you make a fast camera pan. And at that point, you will see that you are at a low FPS when you make a fast movement. But this deactivates when you make the fast movement. So to me, I'm not going to change my mind on, and I tried it in this game, and it's exactly what it does. And it doesn't do it every time. But sometimes it actually does it after you've done it. It's almost like a delayed reaction. So you'll make a faster movement in the camera, and then you'll go back. So if you've spotted an enemy and then turn to run in a different direction, it will then, once you've turned back and you're almost running in a straight line, you'll see your frame rate will go from 160, it will just hit down to 90 or whatever, and then it will kind of go back up, and then it will kind of bounce around a little bit. So that I found strange, because when I've got my frame rate locked at 80, it stays at 80. So when I start making any fast movements, I make fast camera movements or anything I do, my frame rate from playing slow to suddenly playing fast stays at 80 FPS. So that actually, to me, felt better than a frame rate that was going 160, 90, 160, 110, 160, 70. Do you know what I mean? It was bouncing around the place. I didn't notice visually much of an issue. The only thing that I did notice is when I panned the camera, it juddered. Like it wasn't giving me a smooth camera pan. It was juddering, and I was finding like the trees and the fence posts and stuff like that felt like they were like juddering around, as if they were kind of like mirror imaging themselves or something like that. And when I just camera panned with it locked at 80 FPS, with obviously without fluid motion frames enabled, it would just give me that 80 FPS camera pan where it wasn't particularly smooth, but I didn't feel like it. Effectively, you could tell the image dropped quality, as in it would get a bit blurrier at the 80 FPS, but it didn't give me the judder. So I actually felt like it actually didn't hurt my eyes as much just going blurry on a fast camera pan to something where it seemed to maybe be a bit clearer in detail when you move the camera fast, but it was like juddering, and the kind of like the trees you'd see would sort of like move like that as you panned past them, and stuff in the distance would do that. So I don't know if I've done something wrong. I think I'm doing it right. Judging by the video that I watched of Mario's, I'm pretty sure I'm doing what I should be doing right. As in, I'm not obviously using any type of VSync or FreeSync. I'm instead using half of my refresh, or below half of my refresh. So like I said, I'm 165. So I'm obviously dropping 5 FPS off that or whatever, and then dropping it down to exactly half of that, and then enabling fluid motion frames, which was taking me to the 160. Like I said, I tried it at 75, so it was taking me to 150. Didn't make any difference. I noticed with fluid motion frames, it did seem that when I panned my camera up and down, it felt like it was causing some sort of, not as much as screen tear, but it was almost like more judder again. So, I don't know. I don't know what to say. Like I said, the main one thing I will say is, if you, and this is to me like quite a major one, because I see a lot of people across the internet saying, oh, I'm using fluid motion frames and I've got 180 frames per second or something like that. You do not have 180 frames per second. How about you try 180 frames per second and then you'll realise what you're saying doesn't actually add up. You have fluid motion frames 180 frames per second. And I think the people that test all these products try to make that quite clear, and I think that's probably why we will probably see upscalers. We will see upscalers be used, I feel, in not too distant future in benchmarks. We're not going to see frame generation, any type of frame, and FSR free frame generation is very good. DLSS free frame generation is very good. We are not going to see those in benchmarks because they are fake frames. They're not, the FPS that you gain from that isn't real FPS. So for fluid motion frames, no, it's far off it. It adds way too much latency, to the point of, I don't feel like I gained. Is that going to stop? Or am I going to have to manually stop it? Hello? God damn it. Right, hold on. You stop doing that. Thank you. So, I don't feel like I actually gained much from it. I actually felt like someone was trying to sell me some sort of illusion that I was supposed to fall for. Because I just actually felt like the latency that I gained from it when I actually got into any type of combat, if I had to try and parry, good luck on that. It's almost like you'd have to readjust and hit the button quite a bit before you would if you weren't using it. And you could readjust to it, and that's fine. I like for 2 seconds I use a wireless mouse, so I did play it on controller. I did quickly try it with the mouse. Mouse is an absolute no-no. because mouse movements are just too fast for it, and it will literally be bouncing up and down constantly. And it's not like I've got my mouse on any type of crazy sensitivity, but it didn't do that on the joypad. I mean, in that, I think in that game I probably gave it a fair test, because in that game, if I did get into any type of combat, obviously you target lock, and because you target lock, you're not basically you're not throwing the screen side to side. You're not making those big camera pans. You're locking onto a target and then you're revolving around that target rather than panning the screen to get onto, to look at that target and react to that target. So I don't know. I haven't changed my mind on it. And I'm not saying that other people should change their minds on it. If it works for you, awesome. Carry on using it. Enjoy it. That's what those features are for obviously for people to enjoy. So this isn't me trying to tell people that they are wrong or they shouldn't enjoy the feature. The only thing that I will say is wrong is when people say that they are using that feature and getting, because it does double your frame rate, obviously. So when people are saying, "Oh, I'm getting 120 FPS," or sorry, 240 FPS. No, you're not getting 240 FPS. I'm sorry, but if you play at 240 FPS, you will realise that what you're getting through fluid motion frames is certainly not 240 FPS. And you can see that, like I said, I was panning the camera at 160 FPS, and it was nothing like if I turned it off and then reset my settings back, so I was running 160 FPS native. And the camera pans were extremely smooth and quite nice at 160 FPS, whereas they were nothing like that with fluid motion frames. I'm not saying they were terrible, but at the same time they weren't terrible at 80. So that's my thoughts on it. I'm going to try the other. I might try in a few other games, but I don't think I'm going to particularly change my mind over it. Like I said, it might have a better use case for someone that's got a 240 hertz monitor. Maybe it does work better if you're at 120 hertz before you lock it in. I wouldn't say 80's that far away from 120, so I'm not quite sure if it would make a world of difference, but maybe it does. I don't know. I can only comment on what I've tried. So I might try it in a few other games. I'm running the AMD system this week. And then I did download the lossless scaling app. So I might figure that out over the weekend, and I might run that over the weekend and see if that's any better. I'm kind of not expecting it to be, because I didn't find the deactivation of fluid motion frames the biggest killer for it. It's not good that it does it. But at the same time, I just didn't feel like... I felt like it was trying to sell me that I was getting 160 FPS. And I'm thinking, you think I'm falling for that? It's like, you're telling me I've got 160 FPS on my FPS counter, and you're talking shit, because this does not feel like 160 FPS, and it does not look like 160. So I don't think that the other one's going to actually make me feel any different. I'll give it a go. But as far as it goes, no. I've used frame generation techniques. I wasn't over keen on them to start with. I'm happy to use them now more so in certain scenarios. If I don't need to use it, I probably won't. I have been using it in The Last Descendant on the NVIDIA system. I'm playing that keyboard and mouse, and I don't notice it. So I'll just play it. If it gave me any type of issue, I've got performance there that I wouldn't particularly have to use it, so it's not like I have to depend on it. I would use it in something like, probably in like Alan Wake, or I use it in Grey Zone Warfare, and it's perfectly fine in Grey Zone Warfare. FSR 3 frame generation in Grey Zone Warfare is perfectly fine. So, and that's keyboard and mouse. Probably relatively, it's not a sweaty Call of Duty game, but it's definitely not a slow-paced game. And I play both of those keyboard and mouse perfect. I would not be using, I can tell you right now, if I didn't have DLSS frame generation or FSR free frame generation in that game. From what I've just tried with Fluid Motion frames, that would not be an option. I'd just have to lower as much settings as I could, or if I had to, I'd drop a resolution, because there is no way that that would work anything like those two other solutions. Those are good solutions. Like I said, but probably the biggest, probably the best thing that I find, obviously, on the AMD system is FSR 3 frame generation. It's good. It does feel a little bit. I was having problems with it in The Last Descendant last night. It keeps crashing the game when I try to enable it. I'm going to look into it a bit more and see if I can figure out exactly what's causing it. I have seen on Reddit and on the Steam reviews that I'm not the only person with the problem now, so that makes me feel slightly better. But I want to look into it a bit more. I did actually manage a video where I was using it, but towards like the end of the video, about 25 minutes, it crashed, and then from that point on, I have not been able to enable it again without the game crashing. When I did use it, it felt a bit off in that game. I don't know why. I had a relatively high frame rate before I used it. I was at like 80 frames per second before I enabled it, and it still didn't feel right, so a little bit strange. I'll look into it a bit more. And yeah,
Motion
that's about
detected
it.
at the front door.
I'm going to leave it there, and I'll catch you in the next one.